Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss some of the constitutional implications for the Brexit that we are about to go through next week. But first, if you want to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this is prompted really by ultimately Richard Corbett, who's one of our most outspoken pro-European MEPs, British MEPs. Has to be emphasised that because Britain produces an awful lot of Eurosceptic MEPs. Of course, we're not going to have any in just over a week's time. But Richard Corbett was speaking in the European Parliament yesterday, and he was explaining why he and other British MEPs will be voting against this Brexit withdrawal bill in the European Parliament. And the Assembly as a whole, I think, is expected to pass it. I don't think there's going to be any more little wrinkles. We are going to be leaving the EU, and we are going to be leaving the EU according to the withdrawal deal. What the European Parliament will be voting for is very different from what the British Parliament has voted for, but ultimately it's the same withdrawal deal. And he was making the point, and it's an extremely valid point, that the Welsh Assembly, the devolved Welsh Assembly, bearing in mind the United Kingdom is made up of 4 individual nations: Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England. And Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland all have their own devolved parliaments who all get to decide on devolved matters, or at least should. The Welsh Assembly has voted against this Brexit deal. Now that was remarkable because Wales as a whole did vote in favour of Brexit during the 2016 referendum. But the parties who are largely in control of that assembly have never wavered from their line that Brexit is bad. In fact, I've said this before and I will say it again, during the last parliament, the party that most impressed me was Plaid Cymru, who are the Welsh Nationalist Party. At all times, and no other party did this, at all times they acted in the best interests of the people they were representing, not putting party political matters ahead. There were some other parties where sometimes doing the right thing was in line with party political matters, but they always, where they conflicted, put party matters first. They did not. So Wales, the Welsh Assembly, has voted against this. The Northern Irish Assembly has voted against it, and that includes the DUP, who are a party that were, as far as I know, still are in favour of some form of Brexit, but certainly not this form of Brexit. It is definitely not the Brexit that was promised in 2016. And needless to say, the Scottish Parliament have voted against this form of Brexit as well. There is only one legislative assembly in the whole of the United Kingdom that has voted in favour of it, and that is the House of Commons, which, yes, represents the whole of the United Kingdom. But as Richard Corbett was explaining, of course, Boris Johnson has control of that assembly with 43% of the votes in last month's general election. And that's 43%, as he noted, of people who went out and voted. It actually represents 29% of the electorate. And not all of the electorate even have the option of a vote. The proportion of the British population, it's much smaller still. The idea that Boris Johnson has formed a people's government is, of course, a nonsense. The idea that what he is driving through is the will of the people is equally a nonsense. And it does raise serious constitutional questions. Questions now for the future. I mean, this Brexit is now going to happen. Nothing is going to stop it, arguing against it. Boris Johnson's not going to have a sudden change of heart, and if he did, he'd have to go back to Parliament and ask them to change their minds, and they're not going to do that either. It is the die is cast. The die is cast. He's crossing the Rubicon as we speak. And this is really a question for the future. The first question is ultimately, if the United Kingdom is to survive, and that has been a big if for the last few years, and it gets bigger all the time. At the end of next year, or the end of this year rather, that if is going to be absolutely enormous. The end of the following year, bigger still. If it is to survive, there are going to have to be some serious questions about how major constitutional changes are decided, because this form of Brexit is being imposed on everyone. It's been imposed on Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland did not vote for Boris Johnson's government or his Brexit. And I don't just mean the Assembly, I mean the people. Wales did not vote for his party, for his Brexit. Scotland didn't. Now at this point, people will point to the fact, well, this is because England did. That England didn't either. Boris Johnson didn't get a majority of votes in England either, even if you add on the votes of the Brexit Party and UKIP. You know, so you had the three parties together that were all representing Brexit. Boris Johnson did not get anything close to a majority even in England. He just, as Richard Corbett says, had the votes of 29% of the electorate, but that gave him 100% of the power. He also noted that of all the assemblies that have voted on this, that is 4 legislative assemblies in the United Kingdom that have voted on Brexit. Only one has approved it, and it is the only one that is not decided by any form of proportional representation. The Northern Irish Assembly, the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Assembly. They're not brilliant systems of proportional representation, but there is a strong element of proportional representation amongst them in deciding their seats. Westminster is not, which is why Boris Johnson was able to gain 100% of the power with only 29% of votes. And ultimately, like I said, there are those who will now say, well, the United Kingdom inevitably now has to fall. I think the likelihood of that is greater than 50%. If I'm honest, I think it's much greater than 50%. It's not certain. Until it happens, it's not certain. Brexit wasn't certain ever since 2016. It was not certain until December the 13th last year. But the United Kingdom, like I said, if it is to survive, it will have to be, it can only be on a promise that the system changes. You cannot have a scenario. You can have a scenario where the National Assembly will get to decide on all sorts of things, but you cannot have a situation where one assembly gets to impose massive constitutional change on what are supposed to be devolved regions. Scotland is supposed to have, the Scottish Parliament is supposed to have precedent over matters devolved to Scotland. So how can Scotland go through this forced constitutional change? The same in Wales, the same in Northern Ireland. It makes a mockery of devolution, a complete mockery of it. And that is completely unsustainable. And what I would say is, although I don't know whether the United Kingdom is doomed, if that doesn't change, then surely its days have to be numbered. So then you have to wonder, is anyone going to be brave enough to stand up and say, if we're to save the United Kingdom, that change has to happen. It's too late for Brexit now, but that change has to be made for the future. And that would, of course, work both ways. If we're looking at rejoining the EU in the future, then, of course, that would be something that all of the assemblies would have to agree on, because that would represent a major constitutional change as well. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the subject. Let me know what yours are in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.